When I was 3 months pregnant, my husband, Major Adrian Blackwell, handed me divorce papers. Not for another woman, but for my widowed sister-in-law who was also carrying a child. In my last life I begged, clung, and died in disgrace. But this time, I signed without hesitation. Let them think I'm weak, while I turn their trap into their funeral pyre. The rain outside beat against the roof like a war drum, steady and merciless. I was 3 months pregnant, yet that morning my entire world crumbled with one sentence. Clara, let's divorce. Adrian Blackwell, my husband, the father of the child growing inside me, the man I had believed in with all my heart, spoke the words so plainly that for a second I thought I had misheard. My teacup trembled in my hand. The steam blurred my vision. What did you say? He didn't flinch. I'm asking you to divorce me. It won't be forever. Just until Lillian gives birth. Lillian Hayes. My late brother-in-law Marcus's widow. She was also pregnant, and apparently my husband's grand plan was to take care of her. I let out a sharp laugh, brittle as glass. You want me to divorce you so you can live with your widowed sister-in-law? Adrian didn't even look ashamed. He leaned forward, his military cap shadowing his sharp features. It's not like that, Clara. Lillian has no one left. Marcus is gone. She's weak, alone, carrying a child. If I don't step in, who will? My hand instinctively moved to my belly. What about me? What about our child? And what about your wife, Adrian? My voice shook, but I forced every word out. What about your own family? His gaze flickered, but only for a moment. You're stronger than she is. You'll manage. This is just a temporary arrangement. Once Lillian's baby is born and she recovers, I'll come back for you. We'll remarry, I swear. Those words, I'll come back for you, were the same poison I had swallowed once before. As I remembered. In my past life I had refused. I had clung to him, begged him not to leave me. I had fought like a drowning woman reaching for air, and in the end, it had only destroyed me. Lillian had died after a failed abortion, Adrian had turned all his rage on me, and by the time I was cast into a labor camp, I had lost everything. My dignity, my child, my life. And yet here he was again, calmly asking me for a divorce as if he hadn't destroyed me once before. But this time I would not play the fool. I looked him dead in the eye. My lips curved into a smile so cold it startled even me. Fine. Let's divorce. For the first time Adrian blinked. He hadn't expected compliance. He had expected begging, tears, pleading. That was the Clara he knew. That was the Clara who died. Yes, I repeated firmly. We'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau right now. No point dragging it out. He frowned. Clara, I have only one condition. I cut him off, my voice steady though my heart pounded. $500. Child support. I won't let my baby starve while you play hero. Adrian stared at me and then, without argument, pulled his wallet from his pocket. He laid the bills on the table as though I had asked for nothing more than bus fare. 3 years of marriage, countless vows, a child in my belly, and he dismissed it all with the flick of a wrist. The sound of paper brushing the wood burned into me deeper than any blade. Let's go, he said curtly. The Civil Affairs Bureau was damp and smelled faintly of mildew. The clerk stamped our papers with a hollow thud that echoed in my chest. When I took the divorce certificate in my hands, the ink-red seal glared up at me like blood on snow. And just like that it was done. As we stepped outside, Adrian let out a sigh of relief. A burden shed, a weight lifted. His shoulders loosened and his voice grew gentle again, almost tender. Clara, don't worry. This is only temporary. Once Lillian's baby is born, I'll come back. We'll be together again. I promise. I turned my head slowly, staring at him until his voice faltered. Then I smiled, sharp, mocking, merciless. Adrian Blackwell, I whispered, do you really think I'm still foolish enough to believe you? I didn't wait for his answer. Clutching the certificate like a weapon, I walked down the bureau's steps and into the rain, every drop washing away the woman I had once been. The old Clara Reynolds was dead. And the one who walked out that day was someone Adrian Blackwell would never see coming. The rain hadn't let up. By the time we stepped out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, the courtyard was slick with water, puddles rippling under every heavy drop. My hand gripped the divorce certificate so tightly the paper threatened to crease. The red seal burned against my palm, not just a mark of finality but a brand of betrayal. Beside me, Adrian Blackwell exhaled like a man newly unshackled. His boots splashed through the rain as if each step were lighter than the last. I turned my head just enough to catch the faint curve at the corner of his lips. That faint, subtle smile of relief. It carved into me more deeply than the stamp on the certificate ever could. But before I could take another step, a sharp, breathy cry pierced the courtyard. My stomach. My gaze snapped forward. There she was. Lillian Hayes, draped in a pale dress that clung to her like damp paper, crouched at the foot of the stairs. One hand clutched her swollen belly, the other pressed theatrically to her forehead. Rain plastered her dark hair across her cheeks, but it couldn't dim the gleam in her eyes that flicked toward me with calculated precision. Her voice trembled as she gasped, it hurts so much." Adrian's entire body jerked at once. He rushed past me without hesitation, the divorce certificate still dangling in my hand, utterly forgotten by him. "Lillian." His voice was sharp with panic. "Don't move. I'll take you to the hospital." He dropped to his knees in the mud, scooping her into his arms with the urgency of a man rescuing a treasure. Rain soaked his uniform, but he didn't seem to care. His only focus was her. Always her. As he straightened, Lillian tilted her head over his shoulder, just enough to meet my gaze. And then she smiled. Not weakly. Not in pain. But smugly. A tiny victorious curl of her lips. There and gone in a heartbeat, hidden from Adrian but flashing at me like a blade. That smile said everything. "See? He's mine now. You're nothing but the discarded wife." In another life I hadn't seen it. Or rather, I hadn't wanted to see it. I had fooled myself into believing her delicate coughs, her trembling hands, her downcast eyes. I had told myself she was pitiful, that she needed my pity. But pity is the first step toward self-destruction. This time I saw clearly. Lillian wasn't weak. She was cunning. Every sigh, every falter, every teardrop was part of a performance. A performance my husband bought into without hesitation. "Hold on, Lillian, we'll get you checked," Adrian murmured urgently as he adjusted her in his arms. His tone was soft, filled with a tenderness I hadn't heard directed at me in years. She nestled against his chest, clutching his uniform like it was her salvation. "Adrian, thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." Her voice cracked on the last word, perfectly timed, perfectly broken, and perfectly false. My fingers dug into the certificate until my knuckles ached. Rain trickled down my temples, but I barely felt it. The scene before me was too familiar. In my past life I had stood exactly here watching exactly this. And I had screamed. I had raged. I had accused Adrian of betrayal, Lillian of manipulation. I had begged him to open his eyes, to see what she really was. But my desperation had only driven him further into her arms. He hadn't seen her as cunning. He had seen her as fragile, besieged by a jealous sister-in-law. The more I fought, the more he despised me. And step by step I had walked into the grave they dug for me. But not this time. This time I lowered my lashes and let the mocking smile rise to my lips. "Go on, Adrian. Hold her tighter. Protect her like she's the jewel of your life. In the end, she'll be the one who drags you down into the mud." Lillian's eyes flickered again, scanning my face as if searching for a reaction. No doubt she expected rage, tears, perhaps even a scene that would confirm my pettiness. She wanted me to scream. She wanted me to prove to Adrian that I was nothing but a bitter, discarded wife. But all she saw was my calm, my composure, my icy silence. I tilted my head slightly, lips curling in a cold smirk that spoke louder than words. "You think you've won, Lillian? You've only chained yourself to a man who will destroy you in the end." Her brows knit together for the briefest moment. The performance faltered. She recovered quickly, but I had seen it. My silence unnerved her. "Good. Let her wonder what I was planning. Clara." Adrian's voice snapped me back. He stood just a few feet away, rain dripping from his chin, Lillian fragile and pitiful in his arms. His eyes searched mine with a strange softness, as if he expected me to worry. "You take care of yourself, all right? Don't tire yourself out. Well, I'll check in on you when I can." My laughter rang sharp and brittle against the rain. "Check in on me?" His brows furrowed. I stepped closer, the divorce certificate between my fingers like a blade. "You don't need to check in, Major Blackwell. You made your choice. Now live with it." The words cut him more deeply than I intended. He flinched just slightly before his expression hardened again. With a curt nod, he turned away, shielding Lillian as he rushed toward the jeep waiting at the curb. I watched them go, her pale hand clinging to his collar, her head nestled against his shoulder. And I smiled. Not in despair. Not in defeat. But in anticipation. Because I knew where this road led. I had walked it before. And this time I wouldn't be the one broken at the end of it. This time I would stand at a distance watching as the two of them, Adrian Blackwell and Lillian Hayes, dragged each other into ruin. I lifted the divorce certificate once more, letting the rain soak into the paper until the red seal bled faintly into the fibers. The ink blurred, but the decision was clear. I was free. And freedom, I realized, was more powerful than any love or hate. Let the games begin. The walk home from the Civil Affairs Bureau felt endless. The rain had slowed, but every step squelched against the muddy road, the damp air clinging to my skin like a shroud. The divorce certificate was tucked safely inside my blouse, pressed against my chest as if it were a talisman. The ink might bleed, the paper might warp, but the truth of it would never vanish. Adrian Blackwell was no longer my husband. For the first time in years, I wasn't bound by him. The thought should have felt liberating. Instead, the silence pressed down heavy on my shoulders. Each step forward was another step away from the girl who had once dreamed of a warm home, a loyal husband, and a simple, happy life. That girl had been buried in my first life. Now only the ashes of her remained. By the time I neared my street, the clouds were breaking. Weak sunlight filtered through the gray, glinting off puddles. I slowed my steps, my eyes lifting instinctively to the small house I called home. And then I froze. A man stood by my front door. He wasn't just standing, he was loitering, peeking inside through the window, shifting from foot to foot with nervous energy. His clothes were shabby, his hair greasy, his shoulders hunched in the way of men who lived off scraps and trouble. But I knew him instantly. Victor Cross. In my past life, his face had been seared into my memory. He was the thug Adrian had caught me in bed with, the one used to condemn me as an adulteress, to ruin my name, to justify my banishment. That day had been the turning point that led me to the labor camp and to my child's death. Seeing him again so soon after the divorce sent a cold jolt down my spine. "What the hell are you doing here?" I called out, my voice sharp as I approached. Victor startled, then turned toward me. His grin spread wide, toothy and shameless, as if we were old friends. Well, look who it is. Clara Reynolds." He drawled my name, his eyes raking over me with a kind of greedy amusement. "Where'd you just come from, all dressed up?" I lifted my chin. "Divorce court." For a brief moment, surprise flickered in his eyes. Then he laughed, clapping his hands together. "So it's true. You really divorced Major Blackwell." I pulled the certificate halfway out of my blouse, letting the official seal flash in the sunlight before tucking it back. "Satisfied?" Victor's grin widened, but his eyes glittered with something darker. "Interesting. Didn't think you had it in you to let go of a man like him. Guess even a soldier's wife has her limits, huh?" I crossed my arms, ignoring the ache in my legs from the long walk. "Spare me your commentary, Victor. Why are you here?" He rocked back on his heels, whistling low. "I was curious. Word gets around fast in a small town. People are saying Adrian's been spending all his time with Lillian Hayes. Guess it's true since you're out here flashing that paper. So tell me," he leaned closer, his breath reeking of stale tobacco. "You figured out their little secret, didn't you?" I narrowed my eyes. "What do you mean by that?" Victor smirked, clearly pleased to have my attention. "You know what I mean. Adrian and Lillian. Those two have been sniffing around each other long before Marcus even died. Hell, I've seen them sneaking glances at each other in town. And now she's pregnant." He chuckled darkly. "Come on, Claire, you're not that naive. The whole village knows it isn't Marcus's kid." My chest tightened. The memory of my past life surged. Me pleading with Adrian, warning him that Lillian's child couldn't possibly belong to Marcus. And Adrian, furious, accusing me of jealousy, of slandering the poor widow. He had chosen to believe Lillian's act over his own wife's truth. I had been powerless then. But now power was mine. "I know," I said calmly. Victor blinked. "You know." I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a blade. "I know she's been with more than just Adrian. You think you're special, Victor? You think you're her only lover. I let out a cold laugh. You're not. Lillian Hayes is a snake with 7 heads. She's been with Owen from the power plant, Daniel from the transit depot, Patrick from the factory. Need me to go on? His smug expression faltered. His eyes darted, searching my face for a lie, but my tone was too steady, my gaze too unflinching. She told me I was the father. His voice wavered as if he were trying to convince himself. I tilted my head, feigning sympathy that dripped with venom. She told all of you that, Victor. He's clever. She plays you men against each other, keeps you dangling while she uses Adrian's name to protect her. And you, I jabbed a finger at his chest. You're nothing but a pawn in her game. The blood drained from his face. He stumbled back a step, muttering under his breath. No, she wouldn't. Oh, she would. I smiled coldly. She already has. You've just been too blind to see it. The thrill of it coursed through me. In my past life, Victor had been one of the weapons used to destroy me. This time I had turned him against her with nothing more than words. Planting the seed of doubt in his heart was the first move in a game I intended to win. His fists clenched, trembling. His voice rose, harsh and cracked. If what you say is true, then she's been lying to me all along. Using me. Now you're starting to understand. I didn't wait for his response. I pushed past him, unlocked my door and stepped inside. Behind me I heard his ragged breathing, his muttered curses. Finally his footsteps stormed away, echoing down the street. I leaned against the door. Once it shut, the damp would cool against my back. My hands shook slightly, not from fear but from exhilaration. This is how it begins, I thought. One by one I'll set them against each other. Lillian. Victor. They all think they can use me as their scapegoat again. Not this time. This time they'll destroy each other. For the first time that day, a genuine smile spread across my face. The storm had passed, leaving the air heavy and damp, the kind that clings to your skin and fills the house with a faint smell of wet earth. I had just finished tucking the divorce certificate into the wooden chest in my room when I heard the front door creak open. Footsteps followed. Slow, heavy, familiar. Adrian Blackwell. I emerged into the narrow hallway just in time to see him carrying Lillian Hayes in his arms like a fragile porcelain doll. She clung to him as though her legs had forgotten how to work, her head nestled against his chest, lips pale in an expression of weakness that was anything but. When she spotted me, her eyes gleamed, but she quickly lowered her lashes and let out a pitiful moan. Adrian. I walk. I feel faint. He soothed her gently, setting her down on the small sofa with the kind of care he had never once shown me. Then, without even glancing at me, he said matter-of-factly, Clara, go buy a chicken and make her some soup. She's anemic. She needs nourishment. The audacity of the command made me laugh. For 3 years of marriage, I had cooked every meal, scrubbed every floor, patched every uniform and carried the weight of his family on my shoulders. His wages had gone straight to his mother, Agatha, and his younger brother. I had never once touched a cent. And now, divorced and discarded, he dared to order me to cook for his mistress? I folded my arms, meeting his gaze with steady calm. Fine. Give me the money and I'll go buy the chicken. For a moment he simply stared as though I had spoken a foreign language. What? Money, I repeated. If Lillian wants soup, you'll pay for it. Adrian's brows knitted together. He was so used to me silently obeying, so used to me sacrificing, that the thought of me demanding compensation seemed unthinkable. Can't you just cover it first? He snapped. I tilted my head. With what? My salary. My voice was low, sharp, and deliberate. I've been married to you for 3 years, Adrian. Not once have you given me a single coin. Your mother shows up every week demanding money for food, for medicine, for her whims. I have never eaten well, never bought myself a single thing, and now you want me to magically summon money for your precious Lillian? Where exactly do you expect me to get it? The silence between us grew thick. I didn't raise my voice, didn't plead, didn't wail. I simply laid the truth bare. Then I added, colder still, you promised me $500 in child support when we divorced. Pay it now. His face twisted, torn between fury and embarrassment. His jaw clenched as though the word child support was a blade cutting into his pride. I don't have that much on me right now. You're going back on your word? I asked, my lips curling. His hand twitched at his side. Clara. I stepped closer, my voice steady, merciless. You wanted this divorce. You wanted your precious Lillian. Fine. I gave you both. But you will not deny me what you owe. I'm carrying your child. If you want me to keep silent about you and your darling widow here, my eyes flicked toward Lillian, who stiffened, then you'd better pay up. Adrian's nostrils flared. He knew exactly what I meant. If word got out that he had divorced his pregnant wife to live openly with his brother's widow, it would not just ruin his reputation, it could end his career. His pride warred with fear for a moment, but fear won. With a grunt of frustration, he yanked open his wallet and shoved a wad of bills into my hand. Take it, he snapped. I slipped the money into my blouse and smiled sweetly. Thank you, Major Blackwell. He stormed out toward the market, no doubt eager to rid himself of my presence, leaving behind only the faint echo of his boots on the wet ground. The moment the door closed, Lillian Hayes shed her act. No more pale face, no more trembling hands. She rose from the sofa with sudden vigor, her eyes blazing. She marched toward me, her finger stabbing the air. What gives you the right to take his money? You're divorced, Clara. You're nothing now. Nothing. That money belongs to me. I leaned against the doorway to my room, arms crossed, unruffled. He owes me. That's why he paid. Her eyes widened, disbelief and outrage twisting her features. I leaned in, voice low and cutting. If you're upset, perhaps take it up with him. After all, he's the one sneaking into your bed while pretending to be a grieving brother. Do you want me to repeat it louder so the neighbors can hear? Lillian's mouth opened, then shut again. She faltered for only a moment, then threw back her head and laughed. Oh, so you know, she said smugly, her voice dripping with pride. Then I won't hide it anymore. My stomach tightened, but my face remained calm. Go on. She stepped closer, her lips curling into a triumphant smile. Adrian loves me, not you. He never has. Do you want to know the truth? On my wedding night with Marcus, while your poor brother-in-law was passed out drunk, Adrian was in my bed. Her words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I only stared, my nails biting into my palms. That's right, she went on gleefully, savoring every word. Your precious husband couldn't even wait until Marcus was cold in the grave. He was mine all along. He promised me, Claire. Promised me that no matter what, he would give me a home, a name, a child. She rested a hand on her swollen belly, smirking. This baby will secure everything. You're just the placeholder. The temporary wife. Her eyes glittered with malice as she leaned close enough for me to smell the perfume clinging to her. And don't think you'll keep that bastard child in your belly. Adrian already told me he will never let it be born. Within 3 days he'll make sure of it. The words sank like ice into my veins. In my past life I hadn't believed her threats. I had clung to Adrian's promises, foolishly thinking he would never harm his own child. But he had. He had destroyed me and the baby without hesitation, all for her. This time I believed her. I met her gaze, my smile razor sharp. Then let's see who survives the next 3 days, Lillian. You, me, or your precious Adrian. For the first time her smirk wavered. The clatter of the front door jolted me from my thoughts. Adrian had gone storming off to the market, no doubt to fetch the chicken he had so arrogantly ordered me to cook for Lillian. The house was briefly quiet, the air damp and heavy, the faint scent of wet earth seeping through the wooden walls. I had barely slipped the wad of money into the lining of my blouse when the sound of sharp, deliberate footsteps echoed down the hallway. And then she appeared. Agatha Blackwell. My mother-in-law, though no longer technically. The woman who had spent 3 years looking at me with nothing but disdain, as though I were a pebble stuck in her shoe. Her narrow eyes darted over me now, glittering with suspicion and hostility. She didn't bother with pleasantries. She barged into my room without knocking, her presence filling the small space like poison. I'm sick, she announced flatly, pressing a hand to her side in an exaggerated gesture. I need to go to the provincial hospital. It's going to cost $500. Give it to me now. Her tone wasn't a request. It was a command, the kind she had grown accustomed to issuing since the day I married Adrian. I stayed seated on the edge of the bed, folding the divorce certificate in my lap as if it were a delicate piece of embroidery. My voice was calm, almost casual. If you need money, go ask your son. Agatha's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. What did you say? I finally raised my gaze to meet hers, steady and cold. Or better yet, go to your new daughter-in-law, Lillian. Why ask me? I'm just an outsider now. Edward and I are divorced. I have no obligation or responsibility to give you anything." The silence that followed was thick and sharp. Agatha's lips parted, then twisted into a sneer. "You cursed brat," she spat. "How dare you talk back to me? You've grown bold, haven't you? Who gave you the nerve? Do you think you're worth $500? Do you think you're worth even 5 cents?" Her words were meant to sting. In the past they might have. I remembered how I used to scramble to please her, how I handed over my savings, how I bought her medicine, food, anything she demanded, just to prove I was a good daughter-in-law. And still she had despised me. Not anymore. I let out a laugh, low, sharp, merciless. "Whether I'm worth it or not isn't for you to decide. Your precious son and his darling widow couldn't wait to be together, so they paid me off to shut me up. That $500 you're so desperate for? That was their hush money." Her face darkened, blotched with crimson. "Lies," she shrieked, spit flying from her mouth. "You dare slander my son. He's a good man, a good soldier. I'll slap you to death for this insolence." She lunged, hand raised, fury twisting her features. But I was no longer the submissive wife she could strike without consequence. I shot to my feet, glaring her down. "One shout from me," I hissed, "and the entire neighborhood will know about Adrian and Lillian. Every aunt, cousin, and neighbor will be buzzing by dinnertime about how your son abandoned his pregnant wife for his brother's widow. You want that, Agatha? You want the world to know the shame you've been hiding." She froze mid-step, her hand trembling in the air. Her eyes darted back and forth, calculating. She knew I wasn't bluffing. She knew that if this scandal spread any further, it would destroy them all. Her face turned purple with suppressed rage. Finally, she lowered her hand, her narrow eyes narrowing further into slits of venom. "You wicked girl," she hissed, her voice dripping with hatred. "Ungrateful, sharp-tongued. I should have known you'd turn into poison. Adrian was too good for you. You were never fit to be his wife." I tilted my head, my smile sharp as glass. "And yet here we are. He divorced me for another woman, and you're standing in my room begging me for money. Tell me, Agatha, who really looks pathetic?" She flinched. Just slightly, but I saw it. For years she had trampled me underfoot, certain of her superiority. Now the balance had shifted and she could feel it, even if she couldn't yet admit it. She spun on her heel and stormed out, muttering curses under her breath. I thought that might be the end of it. But only minutes later she returned, her voice shrill as she barked from the kitchen, "Get in here and make that soup." I didn't move. I remained seated, smoothing the edges of the certificate with deliberate calm. When I didn't appear, her shrieks grew louder. Finally, curiosity pricked, I slipped silently down the hallway and stopped just before the kitchen door. Through the crack I saw them, Agatha, Adrian, and Lillian, huddled together in the corner, their voices hushed. Agatha's raspy voice was sharp with urgency. "Sarah knows about you and Lillian. She's squeezing you for money. If we don't deal with her soon, we'll never have peace." Adrian's tone was tense but steady. "Yeah, I'm worried she'll keep making trouble. We have to put an end to it." Lillian chimed in, her voice eager, venomous. "Exactly. We can't let her walk around with that smug face holding things over us. We need to take care of her before she ruins everything." The air seemed to grow colder, my breath misting against the wood. Agatha leaned closer. "So what's the plan?" Adrian's reply was low, almost a whisper, but I heard every word. "At first I was going to let her stay. As long as she kept quiet and behaved, it wouldn't matter. But now that she knows everything, we can't keep her around. We move tonight. I've already prepared the drug. All we need is to pin her with some man. Make it look like she was cheating." A cold smile curved across my lips. So that was it. They intended to replay the same trick they had used in my past life. Drug me, stage a scandal, frame me for adultery, and cast me out in disgrace. How ironic. They hadn't realized I had already lived through this trap once before. This time I would not only avoid it, I would turn it back on them. I slipped away silently, my mind already weaving plans as intricate as spider's silk. The words of their conspiracy clung to me long after I slipped away from the kitchen door. Drug her. Pin her with a man. Make it look like she was cheating. It was the same trick they had used in my past life, the trick that had condemned me. Back then I had been shocked, terrified, powerless. I hadn't even realized what was happening until it was too late. But now I smiled. Because fate had handed me the script in advance. and this time I would be the one directing the play. I moved through the house as if nothing had changed. I set a small fire in the stove, boiled water for tea and hummed softly under my breath. To anyone watching, I was the same subdued Clara Reynolds who had always bowed her head and obeyed. But beneath that calm exterior my mind raced. The plan had to be executed carefully. Too soon and they might catch on. Too late and I'd be the one caught. I waited until Adrian left with his mother on some errand. Only Lillian remained, resting in her room. I slipped into the shadows of the hallway, barefoot so the wooden planks wouldn't creak. Lillian's door was ajar. She had left her nightstand drawer half open, her carelessness born of arrogance. I eased it open and found a small packet of powder wrapped in cheap paper. The drug. I lifted it, weighing it in my hand, then slid a decoy packet, filled with harmless ground flour I had prepared earlier, into its place. The real drug I tucked carefully into the folds of my dress. On the vanity sat a tin of powdered milk, the kind Adrian mixed for Lillian every night. My lips curved. I unscrewed the lid, tipped the drug in, and stirred until the white granules dissolved seamlessly. By the time I closed the drawer and slipped back into the hall, my heart was pounding but my face remained serene. The trap was set. That evening the air in the house grew thick with tension. Adrian avoided my eyes at supper, his movements stiff, rehearsed. Lillian, meanwhile, feigned exhaustion, retiring early to her room. Agatha muttered under her breath, her glare sharp as daggers. When the lamps were lit and the house fell quiet, I sat in my room with a book open on my lap. I wasn't reading a single word. My ears were tuned to every creak of the house. Finally the door pushed open. Adrian stepped in carrying a small tray. On it sat a steaming bowl of sweet egg soup fragrant with brown sugar. His expression was unusually soft, almost tender. "Clara," he said gently, "you must be tired. You've had a hard day. I made this for you." I nearly laughed aloud. The sight of him pretending to care after handing me divorce papers only that morning was almost comical. But I let none of that show. Instead I looked up with wide eyes, feigning surprise. "For me?" He nodded, setting the bowl on the table. "I know things have been difficult between us. But there's nothing going on between me and Lillian. People misunderstand. I just want to help her because of Marcus. You understand, don't you?" His words were honey, but the bowl in his hands was poison. In my past life I had hesitated. I had sniffed at the soup suspiciously, questioned him, and that hesitation had sealed my fate. This time I smiled sweetly, lifted the bowl and took a long sip. The sweetness filled my mouth, the warmth sliding down my throat. I finished the entire bowl in a single sitting, setting it down with a satisfied sigh. Adrian visibly relaxed. His shoulders dropped, the tightness around his mouth easing. He had expected resistance. He had expected me to fight. But watching me drink it so eagerly, he believed the drug was already at work. He reached forward, brushing a hand over my hair. "Get some rest. Everything will be better tomorrow." I smiled up at him, my eyes calm. "Yes, Adrian. Everything will be better tomorrow." But while he left my room with a smug little grin tugging at his lips, another scene was unfolding just down the hall. Lillian Hayes lay in bed, her nightgown clinging to her skin. The drugged milk Adrian had prepared earlier now coursed through her veins, its heat igniting her nerves, unraveling her control. She tossed and turned, her breathing shallow, her eyes hazy. Every fiber of her being screamed for release. And when Adrian came to check on her, she reached for him. "Adrian." Her voice was low, needy, trembling. She clutched his wrist, her eyes dark and glassy. "Don't leave me tonight. Please." In my past life I had never known this detail. I had only been told she was delicate, ill, in need of care. But now, crouched silently just outside her door, I watched the truth unfold. Adrian hesitated only briefly. His sense of duty, his guilt, his desire, they all collided in that moment. And when Lillian pressed closer, her lips brushing his jaw, he yielded. Their shadows merged against the paper window, two figures entwined. The air filled with the sound of her moans, his ragged breaths, the creak of the bed. I closed my eyes, a cold smile on my lips. The drug had worked perfectly. Back in my room, I washed my face with cool water and changed into fresh clothes. My body was calm but my mind raced. I had survived the first act of their scheme. The poison meant for me had been swallowed by the two of them instead. And now they would bind themselves tighter in their own shame. I lit a single candle, its flame flickering weakly against the darkness. My reflection in the bronze mirror looked back at me, a woman with pale skin, dark eyes, and a smile both weary and sharp. "I won't scream," I whispered to my reflection. "I won't beg. This time you'll be the ones clawing for air while I watch." The house grew quiet except for the muffled sounds from Lillian's room. I lay down on my bed, feigning drowsiness, my hand resting lightly on my belly. For my child, for myself, I would endure. And when the time came, I would strike. An hour later, Adrian returned to my room. His face was flushed, his collar askew, but he forced a calm smile. He looked down at me, or rather at what he thought was my drugged, half-conscious state, and allowed himself a small smirk. Leaning down, he whispered, "Sleep well, Clara. Tomorrow everything will be different." Then he slipped away quietly, shutting the door with careful hands. But I was wide awake. I pressed my fingers to the hidden money in my blouse, feeling the crinkle of the bills. And beneath my palm the steady flutter of life in my womb. Adrian thought the game was already won. But the board was mine now. That night, as the moonlight spilled through the shutters, I heard the neighbor's dogs bark in the distance. The scent of chicken broth drifted faintly from the kitchen where Agatha had left the pot simmering. The household slept uneasily, unaware of the storm building within its walls. I closed my eyes and smiled. Tomorrow they would think they were closing a trap around me. But when the jaws snapped shut, they'd find themselves the prey. The night was thick with tension, so heavy it pressed against the walls of the house like a living thing. From my room, I listened to the floorboards creak under Adrian's boots, the hushed whispers of Agatha, the occasional cough from Lillian's room. The stage was set, each actor waiting in their place. And I, the woman they thought would be victim again, lay in bed, eyes open, heart steady, hand clenched around the brick I had hidden under my pillow. I knew what was coming. I had lived it once before. Victor Cross. The thug they'd chosen as my downfall. Sure enough, the faint scrape of the back window being lifted reached my ears. My lips curved into a cold smile. The sound of shuffling footsteps, then the heavy breathing of a man creeping inside. The faint odor of alcohol and sweat followed him like a shadow. Victor. He thought I was asleep. He thought I had drunk the drug and was lying here waiting, vulnerable, ripe for his disgraceful task. He leaned over me, his breath hot and sour. "Heh, sis-in-law, looks like tonight's your unlucky night." I moved before he could blink. The brick slammed into his temple with a sickening thud. His eyes went wide, his body jerking violently before collapsing onto the floor. "Unlucky," I whispered, standing over him, brick still in hand. "No, Victor. Tonight you're the unlucky one." I struck again, lower this time, ensuring he'd never again be useful to any woman in the way he thought. His groan was cut short, his body limp. Breathing hard, I dragged him by the ankles, his dead weight scraping across the floorboards, out the back door and toward the outhouse. There I left him sprawled like the trash he was. Inside, I tugged the bed covers, making them creak and squeal under my deliberate movements. From the hallway, I caught the faint sound of Agatha's footsteps, her ear pressed against the door. Yes. Let her believe the trap was working. Let her think I was writhing under a man's weight. I even let out a low moan, half laughing under my breath at the absurdity of it. Satisfied, Agatha scurried off. I heard her shrill voice outside, calling neighbors, summoning witnesses like a mad crow gathering a flock. Good. The audience was coming. And my play was about to begin. Within minutes, the quiet night erupted with voices. Aunt Jiang from next door, Granny Lu from down the lane, old Madame Jiao who never missed gossip. They all gathered in the courtyard, lanterns in hand, eyes gleaming with curiosity. Agatha's shrieks carried through the night. "Quick! Come everyone! That shameless Clara is cheating in her room. Right under Adrian's roof." Gasps, mutters, laughter. All the sounds of a hungry crowd ready to feast on scandal. I remained still, letting the minutes stretch, listening to the crowd grow restless. Then Agatha stormed into my room, neighbors pressing at her back. "Sarah, bring out that man. Show everyone what kind of disgrace you are." She yanked back the blanket and froze. There was no man. No body. Only a large stuffed suitcase beneath the covers. The crowd murmured in confusion. "Where's the man? Didn't you say she was with someone?" Agatha's face flushed purple. "I saw him. I heard she was." But before she could stammer further, my voice rang out from across the hall, loud and clear, slicing through the night. I can't live like this anymore. Adrian Blackwell, you heartless bastard. The crowd turned, their lanterns bobbing as they rushed toward the sound of my cry. And there I was, standing in the doorway of Lillian's bedroom, hair loose, rolling pin clutched in both hands, fury etched into every line of my face. Inside, Adrian was huddled on the floor, his face bloody, while Lillian clung to him in shame. The neighbors gasped. The lantern light spilled over the two of them, tangled together, clothes disheveled, the air thick with the undeniable stench of betrayal. I swung the rolling pin again, striking Adrian across the shoulder. You told me you were helping her because of Marcus. That all your wages went to her out of duty. Was this your duty? Crawling into her bed like a dog. Clara, stop. Adrian roared, trying to shield Lillian with his body. But I was relentless. I struck again, shouting, Marcus hasn't even been dead a year. His bones aren't cold in the ground, and you're rutting with his widow in my house, under my roof, eating my food. The neighbors murmured louder, shock and disgust rippling through them. I turned my fury on Lillian. And I treated you like a sister. I brought you food, medicine, money after Marcus died. And this is how you repay me? By seducing your husband's brother? By mocking me in my own home? Lillian sobbed, clinging to Adrian. No, it's not. Don't you dare. I snapped, pointing the rolling pin at her belly. 3 months dead Marcus is, and you're already flaunting a 2-month belly. Do you want me to draw the math for everyone here? The crowd gasped. Granny Lou clapped a hand over her mouth. So the child isn't Marcus's? Of course it isn't. I cried. Look at them. Look with your own eyes. Do you think this is the first time? They've been rolling around like pigs for months. Adrian tried to rise, but the crowd pressed closer, their voices a rising tide of outrage. This is disgraceful. Aunt Jiang spat. His wife is still pregnant and he's with his brother's widow? Shameless. No morals at all, another neighbor cried. Poor Marcus. Dead and his wife doing this. The whispers grew, some angry, some gleeful. Fingers pointed, tongues wagged. Even those Agatha had brought to shame me now turned their scorn on Adrian and Lillian. Agatha herself looked frantic, wringing her hands. No, this isn't what it looks like. But the crowd wasn't listening. They were transfixed by the sight of Adrian and Lillian locked together, unable to separate, their bodies trembling from the drug's lingering effects. Someone gasped. They're stuck. Look at them. Another voice cried out, it's true. They can't get apart. The scene descended into chaos. Neighbors shouting, some laughing cruelly, others shaking their heads in disgust. I dropped the rolling pin, tears streaking my face, not of weakness but of fury sharpened into performance. You all see it now. I cried. This is what I've endured. This is why he divorced me. For this shameless woman, for this betrayal while I carry his child. The crowd roared. Monsters. Filth. Adrian groaned, his head hanging in humiliation. Lillian buried her face in his chest, sobbing. And I stood tall, trembling but unbroken. My neighbors rushed to my side, voices full of sympathy now. Aunt Jiang patted my shoulder. Claire, you poor girl. We thought you were the one at fault, but now we see the truth. He's the beast, not you. Divorcing you for her? He deserves every bruise you gave him. Granny Lou croaked. Their pity was a balm, but I didn't need it. What I needed was for Adrian and Lillian to drown in their own disgrace. And tonight they had. I turned, my voice cutting through the clamor one last time. Remember this, everyone. Remember how Adrian Blackwell abandoned his wife and unborn child for his brother's widow. Remember how Lillian Hayes betrayed Marcus's memory. Let their shame never be forgotten. The crowd erupted in agreement. And in that moment I knew, the tables had turned. The trap meant for me had become their noose. And this was only the beginning. The uproar of that night echoed far beyond my little courtyard. What began as whispers among curious neighbors quickly spread like wildfire across town. By dawn, the entire district knew. Major Adrian Blackwell had divorced his pregnant wife for his brother's widow, only to be caught in a scandalous embrace with her, in front of half the neighborhood. For once, I didn't have to defend myself. The town spoke for me. Shameless, one woman hissed as she walked past our gate. Marcus's spirit must be weeping in his grave. muttered another. I always said Adrian looked too smug in his uniform. Now we know why. Everywhere voices condemned them. And I, standing quietly by the window with my hand on my belly, felt a calm satisfaction settle in my chest. This time I was not the one cast out in disgrace. They were. 3 days later, the pounding of boots echoed down our street. A squad of officers in crisp uniforms marched straight to the Blackwell house. Their expressions were grim, their voices clipped. "Major Adrian Blackwell," the lead officer barked, "you are under investigation for misconduct and moral corruption. Hand over your weapon and come with us." Adrian stumbled out of the house, his face pale and swollen from the beating he had taken during the scandal. He tried to protest, his voice cracking. "There's been a mistake. I was framed." The officer cut him off coldly. "The entire town witnessed your conduct. Do you deny it?" Adrian's eyes darted wildly, searching for sympathy, for someone to defend him. They landed on me. For a moment, desperation flickered across his face. The same man who had handed me divorce papers and whispered sweet lies about remarrying later, now looked at me like a drowning man reaching for a rope. "Clara," his voice was hoarse. Tell them I'm not." I stepped forward, my face calm, my tone flat. "You told me yourself the divorce was temporary. That once Lillian gave birth you'd come back to me. But while I carried your child you were in her bed. What more is there to say?" The officer's jaw tightened. He nodded sharply. "Take him." The soldiers seized Adrian by the arms. His protests turned to curses turned to pleas, but none of it mattered. By nightfall he was dishonorably discharged. The proud Major Blackwell, once the pride of his regiment, was nothing more than a disgraced man stripped of rank, uniform, and dignity. But fate wasn't done yet. Lillian's downfall came swiftly after. The drug I had switched had left lingering effects. Her body weakened, her pregnancy unstable. When the Tucker family, Victor's kin, learned what had happened to their son, they stormed into town in fury. "You used him," Victor's elder brother bellowed outside the clinic where Lillian was recovering. "You dragged him into your filth and now he's half a man. You'll pay for this, Lillian Hayes." They didn't care about her tears, her excuses, her trembling hands. To them she was the reason Victor lay crippled. When word spread that she had been with not only Adrian but Victor, and perhaps others too, even those who once pitied her turned their backs. Women whispered behind her in the market. She was always too fond of attention. Poor Marcus. He must be cursing her from the grave. Her child? Who even knows who the father was? Lillian miscarried soon after, her body too frail to withstand the storm. I watched from a distance as she was carried out of the clinic, pale and hollow-eyed, her arrogance stripped away. For the first time I saw her as she truly was. Not a rival, not a temptress, but a broken woman who had destroyed herself. And I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Agatha Blackwell tried for a time to salvage her pride. She stormed into my home one afternoon, bruises still fresh on her face from the Tucker family's fury. "You ungrateful witch," she spat, her voice shrill. "This is all your fault. You cursed our family, you brought ruin on Adrian. If you hadn't fought him, if you hadn't." I cut her off with a laugh. My fault? Was it my hand that pulled Adrian into Lillian's bed? Was it my voice that begged neighbors to come watch me cheating, only for them to catch your son rutting with his brother's widow instead? Her face twisted, her chest heaving. I stepped closer, my voice low and sharp. "You thought you could frame me. You thought you could destroy me like last time. But look around you, Agatha. Who's the one left with nothing now?" For once she had no reply. She spat at my feet, muttered a curse and stumbled away. That was the last time she ever dared set foot in my house. With Adrian ruined, Lillian disgraced, and Agatha powerless, there was nothing left to bind me to this place. I sold the house my parents had left me along with the small job I held. With the money I bought a train ticket south, to the city where factories buzzed, where shops bustled, where opportunities waited for anyone bold enough to seize them. The first time I stood in that city square watching neon signs flicker and vendors call out their wares, I felt a rush of something I hadn't felt in 2 lifetimes. Freedom. I began small. A stall selling fabric scraps, then a corner in a shop, then a storefront of my own. I poured my savings, my sweat, my cunning into every step. Within 3 years I had my own clothing brand, several shops across the city, and workers who looked to me with respect. Clara Reynolds, once the discarded wife, once the woman sent to a labor camp, was now an independent businesswoman. Every night when I locked my shop and walked home under the city lights, I felt the weight of my past lives fall further and further away. News still reached me, of course. Small towns love to gossip and their stories travel far. Adrian had returned to his hometown with Agatha, blind in one eye, limping from his injuries, a shell of the soldier he once was. Unable to work, shunned by his peers, he took to drinking. The man who once strutted in uniform now begged odd jobs to survive. Lillian, abandoned by him, had briefly gone back to the Tucker family. But they despised her too. Rumors said she ended up alone, barren and bitter, her beauty fading as quickly as her reputation. They had chosen each other, betrayed everyone else, and in the end, they destroyed each other. Just as I had known they would. On a late autumn evening years later, I walked out of a restaurant after dinner. The city lights glowed warm against the crisp night air. Clara Reynolds. I turned. Aunt Jiang, my old neighbor, hurried toward me, her face lit with recognition. It really is you. My goodness, you've become so beautiful, so successful. I knew you'd rise above them all. Her words filled me with a quiet pride. Yes. I had risen. Adrian, Lillian, Agatha, they were nothing but ghosts of a past life now. Their downfall had freed me. Their cruelty had forged me. As I walked back to my car, the streets alive with the promise of tomorrow, I whispered to myself, I was once their pawn. Now I am my own queen. And with that I stepped into the light of my new life, reborn, untouchable and free. The city air was sharp and cool as I locked the shutters of my boutique for the evening. The glow of neon signs lit the street, and I stood for a moment just watching the flow of people. Faces alive with purpose, voices buzzing with plans. It had been years since I left that little town, years since I walked out of the Blackwell house for the last time. But sometimes the memories returned. The whispers, the schemes, the endless cruelty, all of it had happened under one roof. A roof that had once been my parents' pride and my only shelter. A house I had stubbornly stayed in even after the divorce because it was mine. That was what most people never understood. They thought I stayed because I was weak, because I had nowhere else to go. But the truth was simpler. The house was my inheritance, not Adrian's. His family had squatted there like leeches, draining me dry. If I had walked away immediately, they would have claimed it as their own, just another victory carved out of my ruin. But I stayed because I refused to hand it to them. I stayed because I knew every creak of those floorboards, every crack in those walls. I knew how to listen, where to watch, how to let their own poison spill back onto them. That house was my battlefield, and I fought my war there until they destroyed themselves. Only then did I sell it. On my terms. With my name on the deed, my hand on the contract, and my future already waiting in the city. Now, years later, I felt nothing when I thought of that house. It no longer haunted me. It was just bricks and wood, a stage that had served its purpose and one I had left behind. I glanced at the window of my shop, where mannequins wore dresses of my own design, fabrics chosen by my hand. This was my house now. My walls. My legacy. The girl who once lived under Adrian's thumb had died on that rainy afternoon at the Civil Affairs Bureau. The woman who stood here now, wealthy, free and unafraid, had been born from those ashes. I smiled, locking the door and stepping into the night. I was no longer the mistress of a haunted house. I was the mistress of my own life. The end.